we booked this in a small room because we are going to offer it in Zoom, and people would just log in and do that. When Kevin Lavoie replied and said, "Hey, see you on the 31st," Sean said, "If Kevin's coming, there are going to be more people coming." So we said we scrambled to get a bigger room and be here. So a couple of things. We have, as you can see, a nice mic here that helps pick up everything in the room. The bad thing is it's a nice mic and it picks up everything in the room, right? So we want to be cautious of that. If folks in the room, you're going to be able to hear it, but we want to be respectful of the folks that are out there watching and listening on Zoom. So any side conversations here will be easily picked up. We want to make sure that they're capturing everything as well. We are recording this as well. So as we go back, and I know there's a few folks that couldn't make it, and that's the other piece. So any of the side conversations will be recorded, going to be a part of it. So just to be cognizant of that as we go through. So from here, maybe just a kind of a quick idea of who's in the room. Hunter, I don't know if we need to do all introductions. I'll introduce Hunter, but you have a lot of, I think almost every director is here from across the state, and the 27 CTEs in conjunction with the folks that have logged in out in cyber world. So I don't want to consume a lot of time with introductions, but just to give you an idea that this is pretty important, as you can see with the number of folks that are part of it. And I'll let you kind of introduce yourself and what you're bringing to the table with this. Hunter and Sean have worked kind of piecing this together with the data and the labor side. So we really wanted him to start out and kind of walk you through kind of those big pieces. So from there, we're going to just jump right in. Awesome. I know your time is precious, so I'm going to turn it over to.
If anybody needs a copy of the presentation, they're on the back table. So
yeah.
And the stuff you sent out.
It is slightly updated, is basically the exact same thing, but today we're having some technical difficulties. So I asked Hunter to prepare everything in screenshots instead of going to the live database, just in case it crashed. We could at least get you some information.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much. This is quite the turnout. I didn't expect this, so this is really great. Folks who are online, can you just give me a quick thumbs up to let me know if you can hear me okay? Great. That's awesome. Thank you. So I'll quickly introduce myself. My name's Hunter Moranci. I'm an economic research analyst for the Center for Workforce Research and Information. The Center for Workforce Research and Information is an agency within the Department of Labor. We come out with a lot of the labor market statistics. I'm sure many of you are familiar from listening to the news about the unemployment rate. That's calculated over in our office. Our office also calculates how many jobs there are in Maine, how many jobs there are by industry, how many jobs there are by occupation. We group these out by different wages. My role in all of this is I'm actually the website manager. So if we're going through the website, or if you folks are on our website as well and you have any questions or any sort of difficulties that I might be able to ease, feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is at the very end of this presentation. I also run a program over there as well called Maine Earns, and I do a lot of the internal reporting. I actually may have been on the phone with some of you, if any of you were doing any sort of WIOA reports for eligible training providers. If you did do that, you may have talked to me or you submitted information to me. So I'm sure I might actually be familiar with a couple of you already. But without further ado, I think I'll get started. And we're going off of a PDF today. Unfortunately, we didn't have Microsoft Word on the computer, so I'm going to try to do the best I can with scrolling or everything. But if for whatever reason I cut off like half a slide or anything, feel free to stop me. And if you have any sort of questions during the presentation, feel free to just raise your hand or shout something out as well, or if I'm going too fast. Yeah, and I'll go on to full screen over here as well. So I want to start by talking a little bit about your information. Obviously your CTE programs offer specific courses or programs. Those programs are classified by what are called SIP codes, which many of you might already be pretty familiar with. These zip codes are organized in a hierarchical structure, with the first 2 digits being a broad general name and the final 4 digits being something more specific. So on the right-hand side of the page right here, I give you a quick example of an electrician. Those first 2 digits of that 460302 indicates that that's a construction trade, and the construction trades hold other things as well, like excavating or even carpentry trades and stuff like that. Those would be categorized in that 46. And that is, as you go farther out, you get more specific information about that specific program.
And if you recall, a lot of your programs currently right now may have like protective services is under like 43.40. Back in the 70s when they were selecting these, they were grouping a lot of like things together. And as you went to standards in the 2008, 2007, as we started moving that direction, it made sense to move away from the higher levels just because it didn't offer the flexibility for you to hold multiple standards under that zip code. It was just much more difficult to manage. So it's still something we're cleaning up today. So many schools have done some work in that, and we do appreciate it. But you know, just like Hunter said, it's designed as the series is the top version of it.
Yeah, and really the big thing that you need to know about zip codes is they represent your program. Here's an example. I don't know if you can read this. If you have the handout, it might be a little bit easier, but this is for Bath Regional Career and Technical. You have a list of different programs that they offer: carpentry, electrician, things like CAD drafting and designing, welding technology, all kind of good skills for Bath Ironworks. I can tell whoever was whoever is in charge of Bath Regional made a phone call with them. But all of these programs right here are coded by a specific zip code. Now, what zip codes train people, or what programs train people for, is to get into an occupation or a specific job. Occupations, by definition, are tasks that employees are paid to perform. For example, I'm an economist. My SOC code, or my occupation, is an economist as well, and that's coded as 193011. You folks would be classified as education administrators, which is 119032. And those folks are principals, superintendents, other sort of managers, probably CTE program managers would fall into this category. And those are coded as 119032, 11 being the that family hierarchy, and that actually falls under management. If you folks were teachers, some of you might have been teachers before you got into your current position. Those are coded under the SOC family as 25. And that can be teachers, anything from physical education teachers or broad post-secondary education teachers, etc. And using the same example as we used before on the previous slide for representing a zip code, an electrician is coded 472111, which 47 represents everyone that's under a construction and extraction occupation, but the full zip code of that person is 472111.
And as you might recall, when we were doing some of the applications in the last several years, I've been referring to a lot of the SOC codes when I give you the labor stats, only to help translate it. When I send you out to ONET, instead of you trying to dig that up, I was using these values to help come up with that, because there is that direct translation is much more challenging. Sometimes you can pull it out, sometimes you can't. So by having the ability to look at both sides of this has helped out a lot to really look at the value of how many people are going to be in that workforce area.
And real quickly, I know it's confusing. I'm showing you a lot of numbers. Zip codes are not SOC codes. Zip codes are program-based. SOC codes are occupation-based. Occupation being what kind of job a person gets. And a single program can train for several occupations. The example that I provided for you right here, electrician, which was 460302. Actually, I'll try to go out to this website. If it ends up lagging, we'll just stick right to the script. But let me see if I can go out there for us. Oh, my link's not going to work. Oh. So this is a crosswalk that you can use in order to find out what your SIP code what your SIP code translates to a occupational code. So we'll do 460302, which I believe is electrician. And as you can see, someone who is training in an electrician program might end up working as a first line supervisor of construction trades, as an electrician, as you can imagine, security and fire alarm system installers, signal and track switch repairs, all sorts of things. For more general SIP codes or programs, you might have a longer list of potential areas, but electrician is a pretty skilled program, and you can imagine a lot of those go into like one of these occupations. The great thing about this crosswalk right here, and I provide a link for you right in the presentation, is you can actually click on one of these links here, for example, electrician, and you can get a lot more information about an electrician. What kind of task are they required to do? What kind of technology skills they might need, any sort of knowledge that they might have. And I think this might be particularly helpful if you're looking to add any new programs, or if you wanted to evaluate some of your programs already and make sure that you're hitting some of this stuff during your training. I think this would be a pretty good tool to go over and just take a look at some of this information. And there's a lot of information on this page: skills, ability, work activities, and even some labor market statistics, which come from our office at the very bottom over here as well. So a lot of information provided right here. I'm gonna go back to the presentation real quickly. And Sean also provides you a crosswalk as well. I believe you emailed it out to everybody.
I believe it was sent out probably around the end of November is one of the original emails I sent out to you folks. And I crosswalked all of our SIP codes to SOC codes. I didn't do it per school just because of timing, and I didn't have an opportunity to do it per your school, but you could look it up pretty simply and come up with it. And that is most current, and that's the beauty of using a standard system. You can look those up. The only ones on that list you will not find directly done is something like a 43.0000, because that again is a family of SIP codes, not a direct SIP code. How we interpreted it back in the 70s, we used it as a program code, but it really should not have been. So those are a little harder to look at, so you kind of have to dig a little deeper. And the other ones you can't find is any of our 99s. Our 99s are self-developed here in Maine, so those will not be found in the national database either. And talking to Joe, our new gentleman who just started with us this week, he and I have already started talking about breaking up those 99 codes and actually giving them names and titles. So if you say you have a different academics, it would be listed academic, we'll say the code would be 99.4 for English and .5 for math or something along those lines. So we're looking at breaking those up and making it more distinguishable other than just a 99 number for future reference.
So at this point, are you saying there's no soft code for those?
Correct, because there's a lot of the 99s originally were designed to help overcome barriers that were not allowing CTE students to take a program of some kind. So they're not anything that would be a career. You're not going to become a career from those programs for the most part.
So if the application does ask for a corresponding crosswalk, you just want us to put not applicable?
Yeah, we wouldn't. But you're right. Yep.
So the big question as it pertains to you is how, once I retrieve this SOC code, how can I use this information to evaluate my program and make sure that my participants are going to be placed upon graduating your program? That's where we come in. And you can use our website directly. I'm going to try to go out to it right now. And again, we're called the Center for Workforce Research and Information. The easiest way to find our page is just type in CWRI in Google. And we're the first one right there, maine.gov/labor/CWRI. This is our website right here. There is a lot of information on this website. Like I mentioned before, we come up with the unemployment rate. We give you total non-farm jobs. We give you demographic information. We give you all kinds of stuff. I'm going to try to focus on only the stuff that that pertains to you today. And I think probably the first place that I would look if I were you folks is to go directly to our occupational projections, which is right here, Job Outlook. It's in that little employment section right there. I'm going to hope this loads. It has a hard time on the network right now. It's looking pretty good, which is a positive. But our projections, we do statewide projections, which gives you a lot more information because we have a larger sample size, but we also do regional projections as well. I'll go into both of these today.
Also, I think we talked earlier that we're going to pull this together. We're going to try to do it by city or by county to help you folks look at your information. When we looked at it and met with Hunter and a couple others from his office, it wasn't feasible to come down to that level because the numbers would be so mismatched because of how careers are moving around. And you could be right on the edge of our county and you could be a town or another. So we decided to leave it what we have consistently done historically. There's a gentleman I talked to who said about 25 years experience here in the state doing just this. And he said using the regional approach has been consistent for, I think, 27 years, I think the number I heard. So we wanted to stay the same way. So when we sent out your information, we gave you what region you belong to help you when you go to this sheet right here to find out which one to use.
So is it reasonable to think that in our region, like if I live in Bath, Portland would be my region also? Because people would probably go to Portland area to get a job?
Yep, they're both part of coastal counties.
Okay, that's good. So the regions are large.
Yep, yeah, there's 3 broad regions. I'll get into it a little bit later. I'll actually show you a map over on our website too, and as long as you know which county you're in, you'll be able to determine which region you're in. So,
But the coastal counties are the ones that have the most projected growth. I think I saw that.
Yep.
I've been kind of flipping through these prior to this. The only, I know it's kind of off the mark, but there is a tab on there that says you can download them.
Yep.
Every time I've tried it, it's not working.
oh, it's not. I will.
I'm on an Apple-based system.
I just
so I
have
don't
one.
know if that is what it is or not.
If you don't, I have my contact information at the very bottom. If you don't mind giving me a call, maybe on Monday or Tuesday, I'll see. It could be related to the Mac or
Okay.
yeah.
Super. Thank you.
Awesome. So I'm glad some of you have already gone out to this website and started looking at some of the occupational projections. I'll go into a little bit more detail for those of you who haven't, but ultimately, once you get to this page right here, I'm going to see if I can zoom in a little bit for you. Let's see. Doesn't do particularly well zoomed in. I might actually zoom out a little bit, but I'll just give you an idea of some of the information that this will provide you. The statewide occupational projections will give you right now 2016 employment and 2026 employment. We're actually going to update this by June this year. So we'll be actually looking at employment levels from 2018 and projecting that out to 2028. We give you the net growth of total jobs in the state. So between 2016 and 2026, our office only projected 94 new jobs within the state. It gives you a percent change of those jobs, how many growth openings there might be, and then kind of the meat and potato of all job openings right here, which is the annual exits and transfers. I'll go into a little bit more detail about that. Let me just zoom out real quick so I can show you some of the other measures. Annual exits and transfers are people who are retiring out of their current occupation. Those are people who are exiting or people who are leaving the labor force for whatever reason. And obviously in our state, there's a lot of job openings from that and a lot of positions that are going to be needed to be filled within the next few years. Transfers are people who are moving from one occupation to another. Between gross exits and transfers, that makes up total openings within the state by occupation. And that's really what you want to take a look at when you're evaluating whether there's going to be jobs available for your folks upon graduation. And I'll give you an example in a little bit. We also provide the annual openings rate, so how fast are these jobs opening on an annual basis, and then also something that's valuable for you is wage rate. So we give you the hourly wage rate and the median wage rate so that you can see that your program participants are able to earn a decent living upon graduation as well. I'll take you to a quick example. We've been looking at electricians quite a bit. And if you want to drill down on a specific occupation, once you have that occupational code or once you know the name of your occupation, if you go to this filter major group right here and click detailed occupations only, and then you can go over here and type in the detailed occupation that you want to look at. We'll look specifically at electricians right here, and that takes you directly right to it. You can also, once you retrieve that SOC code from that crosswalk website that we took a look at earlier, you can also type it into the SOC code area right here. So looking at electricians, there were 3,400 of them roughly in 2016. There's 3,300 in 2026. So there's actually, we project a smaller amount of electricians by 2026 from 2016. But does that mean that there is going to be no openings for electricians within the state? Absolutely not. We project that there are roughly 356 openings for electricians every single year. And that's because of, again, people retiring or people transferring to another occupation. Electricians are compensated fairly well, as you can see over here. On average, they make about $24 an hour. So again, once you get that occupational code using that crosswalk that we presented, you can go right to our website over here. You can type in that detailed occupation, or you can type in the code, and then you can get those labor market statistics that will help evaluate your program. I have a couple of quick slides just to hit home some of that information right here. This one, again, goes over all those measures that I listed out. The two that are probably most important for you will be the two that are highlighted right here. The annual total openings, so how many job openings for that specific occupation are there in the state of Maine every single year. And then also the median wage as well, so that you can see that the income that person is going to be paid will be enough to make a good living. And again, just that point that I hit home earlier, even declining occupations like electricians, for example, occupations that we project will actually have a smaller number in 2026 than there was in 2016, doesn't necessarily mean that there's going to be no openings. In fact, there are so many people retiring or transferring to another occupation or leaving the labor force altogether, with whether to pursue a higher education or something like that, that there's going to be a lot of openings, even in jobs that are declined to lose. And these are by broad occupational groups, so those two-digit families that we were talking about earlier. And as you can see, and this lists annual job openings by each one of those groups. Office and administrative support is projected to decline pretty significantly. There's going to be a lot less jobs, but ultimately there's the most annual total openings in that group, regardless of that. So there's still a lot of positions to be filled, actually the most positions to be filled in that area. So just something to think about when you're evaluating those programs. Does that make sense to everybody? Excellent, thank you. Another place to look on our website is high wage in demand jobs. And let me go over to that real quick. If you're over on our home screen right here, again, this is the job outlook page that we were just looking at. Under income and wages, we can get to high wage in demand jobs. And this gives us a list of occupations. Hopefully it loads for us. Excellent. That all occupations that have greater than 20 annual openings within the state, but also pay higher than the median wage of all occupations within the state. We can filter through that information the same way that we filtered through on the occupational projections page. If we know our occupation, electrician, we can, oh, this one is slightly different. I have to select all to deselect everything first. And then I type in electrician. I can go right here and I look at this and I automatically go, okay, electricians is on that high wage in demand list. So it's an occupation with greater than 20 annual openings, but also pays more than the median wage of all occupations for the state. So I think this is particularly important if you're trying to evaluate potentially opening up a new program, to go right over to this page and see if what that program is training a person for, whether that occupation is part of something that has a lot of annual openings and also has it pays a decent medium wage. One thing that I want to add real quickly, electrician is a pretty narrow group. Like we know that someone who's getting trained to be an electrician will likely probably go into an electrician or a related program, but there are some programs that are very broad, that might have several occupations that they're training for. Those occupations might be a lot smaller than electricians. There's over 3,400 electricians in the state, but there might be another occupation with maybe 30 or 40 people in the state. And because there's so few of those folks, there's probably not going to be 20 annual openings in a cell that's 30 or 40 individuals. So when you're looking at occupations that might train for several things, make sure that you're also considering some of the other occupations that they're being trained for.
Can you just go back to the previous slide for a second?
Sure.
About what you had? No, the one that had the, you went to electrician. It should have been on the same page.
Yep.
That you just had.
Oh, to go back to the Outlook page?
Yeah. That chart, and just take electrician out of it.
Yep.
The interesting part about this chart is those colors that are on there represent what type of education they need to meet or
Yep.
have. And I think you'll notice that electrician it doesn't say a college degree, and it will say what it is. I found that very helpful for me in doing a presentation just recently to show them that a lot of our students that go out and succeed do not need a 4-year degree. And those different colors will tell you what the minimum degree or experience is needed for them to get that job.
That's a great point, and something I actually would have forgot to
I didn't
mention.
mean to steal your thunder.
No,
that
is-
was the most important part.
Yeah, that's great. And you can actually filter by the typical education required. So if we wanted to take a look at some occupations that don't necessarily require a 4-year degree, we'll go all the way up to a associate's degree. So high school diploma or equivalent, some college no degree, post-secondary non-degree award for no formal education. We can get a list of those occupations that only require those degree types and that still meet the 2 thresholds for being a high wage in-demand job. So having greater than 20 annual openings and also has a median wage greater than the rest of the state. That's a really good point. Thank you for bringing that up. Any other questions? All right. We'll the third part of this is I'll quickly go back out to Job Outlook and we'll take a look at some of the regional projections as well. So if we click on that Job Outlook page, and we go down to regional employment projections right here. It's loading pretty well today. That's a good sign. We can see again the 3 workforce regions that we have, and the workforce regions are how we group up the regional projections. We have coastal counties, and because this is tough to read, I'll read it out loud for you. Coastal counties include Cumberland County, Knox County, Lincoln County, Saginaw, Waldo, and York. Central Western is Androscoggin, Franklin, Kennebec, Oxford, and Somerset. And the Northeast counties are Hancock, Penobscot, Piscataquis, Washington, and Aroostook. And you can take a look at this chart over here and highlight over where your area might be, and then you'll be able to tell which one of these workforce regions you're in. Yep.
I had a concern about using that data because it is such a broad swath and representing York County. I think York and Cumberland County more like to one another than they are necessarily to the extended
I
coast.
completely agree with you. The the one thing is when we start to do projections at even a county level, there's so much noise within that small area. Say for Saginaw County, if Bath Iron Works were to lose a contract or were to gain a contract and they were going to hire quite a bit or lower quite a bit, we don't have enough information on the employer to be able to forecast that information. We can only really forecast off of current trends. And if we get into a smaller counties, then there's a lot of noise, and there might be big time forecasts that we would miss just because we don't have some of that insider knowledge. So unfortunately for this, we did have to group it up into the regions. There are other
There's some data that is county specific, but you're saying it's not as, say, conservative, if you will, or as accurate.
Yeah, correct. I will take you out to one other page where you can take a look at some of the county level information. The problem with it is it doesn't come up with that annual total openings number, which I think is really helpful when you're evaluating how many openings there's going to be within a particular occupation. But we do have a lot of county level data on our website. We do have county level occupational data, but it's not, but no projections are associated with it. But that's a good observation.
Can I ask another question while we're on the topic? Some of our partners were looking at census data, and I kind of question its validity because it's 10 years old. Any thoughts about that? I realize that's not your...
No, we deal with census data quite a bit on our website. Going back to 2010, you're correct. It's there are quite a few changes within that time. There's a census program called the American Community Survey that updates a lot of those statistics annually, and that is part of the census. It's part of the census collection of information now. One thing that I like to look at, and you can get most of the information that the census provides, is 5-year trends. So if you 2018 actually just came out. If you go to the 2018 5-year annual trends, you can actually get a pretty accurate number for what's going on within that. And pretty soon we're due for another census year this year, and we'll be getting that information. And once that information comes in, the American Community Survey is benchmarked off of that information. So so if you use ACS data, you can get more recent information, and it provides almost as much material as the census.
American again.
American Community Survey, ACS. Yep.
And like I said earlier, we did ask that same question as well, trying to break it down. And just historically, this has been more accurate than doing it by county. Yeah.
We have a footprint in 2 different areas there. What do we do?
Oh, you're going to look at what I would look at is looking at both. Look at where you have to kind of know where your students go when they're done. It helps you direct how you want to look at your data, because you could look at exactly right on the edge of each. You're going to look at both sides saying, gosh, in the area, a lot of going to Bangor, or going more west. You're going to want to know which programs are doing that. Kind of thinking that know your programs at that level to pull out individual data that works for each one.
The good thing in general for the occupational trends for every area, I wouldn't say there's nothing that's completely different. For example, electricians in the coastal counties, I don't think it's going to be jumping way up and at the same time going in the opposite direction in the northwestern counties. So in general, the trends are going to work the same. It might not always be the case, but in general, the trends should be fairly similar.
And just one more thing about that. When we're looking at the data and your folks are using it to help evaluate your programs, think of this as just one tool to be used and not the only tool. You're not going to look at the data and say, 28% this year for electricians. So we're going to be looking at your region, 28%, and what is the performance of your individual program. That's not what we're asking you folks to do. We're asking you to use these tools, the information I sent, the information that Hunter is graciously doing here, because this was a godsend when we found this, to bring this together to look at your program as an overall, not as just one slice, because in the data I sent you, it's just one slice of information versus bringing all this together to try to address your questions or evaluation of your programs.
No problem. So for the regional projections, filtering the information is exactly the same way as done on the normal Outlook page or on the high wage and demand jobs.
Okay, just wondering, now I'm cool, thank you. I was feeling warm. No, it's really, I'm not that wet, thank you. I'm a
Perfect.
swimmer, I love the water, no worries.
So if, but the only real difference here is we have this region category over here. Right now we have coastal counties selected. Again, if you want to take a look at those major 2-digit SOC code groups, you can click major groups only, and there we have the broad categories right here in the annual total openings for each one of those groups, and then the median hourly wage of each one of those groups as well. By looking at this, you can tell that computer and mathematical occupations had earns $36 an hour, and there's approximately let's see, almost 7,000 of them in the coastal counties. But you can also take a look at those detailed occupations as well too, which are those 6-digit codes that we were talking about earlier. Again, we can take a look at. Reset my filters here. Occasionally you'll run into this where you have to reset your filters, but you can also take a look at a specific detailed occupation. Again, electrician was one that we've been looking at. Oh, I might have to take a look at this one later. By the end of today, what you'll be able to do is select this detailed occupation group, and then you can write in electrician in this detailed occupation page. Be able to filter for that. Don't know why it's not working at the moment, but I'm the web guy, so I'll have this done for us. And let's see. I also want to take you out to our general occupations page, which is not occupational projections, but the occupations page gives you a little bit more wage information. I'll take you out there before I start explaining it. And that is over in income and wages, this red box right here, and by occupation. And the most detailed information actually comes when you download this this spreadsheet right here. You can actually download spreadsheets for every one of our interactives, and I'll catch up with you later to try to figure that out, because you're probably not the only one that has that problem. When you download this, you can get all kinds of wage information. The 3 that we show you right here is just average wage, 25th percentile wage, which is the bottom 25% of folks, what are their earnings? The median wage, which is the 50% of folks, what are their earnings? And then the 75th percentile, which is what are the top 75% of folks earning. But in that detailed spreadsheet, if you download it, you can also get an entry wage, which is the 10th percentile, which is generally people with very little previous job experience. So if someone's coming directly out of a program, that might be what they expect to make initially, but then as they progress throughout their career and become more skilled, they can they'll move up this wage threshold right here. Unlike the projections, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I don't want to interrupt you.
Yeah, unlike the projections, we can actually get into different geography levels here. One of them being county level, and you can select that right here. If you want to get a detailed area name. For example, maybe we'll do, we're in Kennebec County right now. We'll take a look at that. You can get the occupational information for Kennebec County right here. Again, estimated employment, how many people are currently working in that occupation in Kennebec County, and then what those folks are earning at different areas of their career. You can also take a look at annual salaries as well, which for the most part is just this number multiplied by 2080, but there are some instances where, for example, teachers, they're not listed as someone earning an hourly wage. They get paid on an annual salary, and you would find a lot of the teachers over here. But again, selecting the occupational groups, it's a little bit harder over here, unfortunately, but what I will do is maybe today. I might not get to it today, but sometime within the next week, I'll have the same selection criteria that we had. But to filter on this page, you need to know your 2-digit family group, which for electricians was construction and extraction. And then you can see all the occupational groups right here. You have to unselect all to get to just electricians alone if you wanted to take a look at them. And then you can see how many electricians are in Kennebec County. There's approximately 140 of them, and their average wage is $24 an hour. Median wage is about $25 an hour, and the 75th percentile electrician in Kennebec County is earning $28.27 an hour. So you can use this to get more information. If your program or a lot of your students that you know of are working in a particular metropolitan statistical area, an MSA, Maine has 3 of them, which is Bangor, Lewiston, Auburn, and Portland, South Portland. You can click on metropolitan statistical area, and then you can also see how many, for example, electricians are working in the Portland, South Portland metropolitan statistical area, which is calculated basically by how many people are within driving time of Portland, basically. And again, there's 610 of those folks, and these are the median earnings. And someone who's working in the Portland, South Portland metropolitan statistical area is actually not earning much more than somebody who's working in Kennebec County, which is something that you can see directly from this. Are there any questions on occupational statistics before I move on? Yes.
Did I hear you say that you multiply the hourly figure by 2080 to get an annual salary?
Yeah.
That's a great data point to have. Thank you. And then the other question I had was, and I apologize because I was a little late, maybe already explained it. What makes it a high wage? Like the rate, there's such a range. What's the formula for that determines a high wage job?
Great question. A high wage job is we consider anything greater than the median of that particular area. Okay, so for so the
it floats is what you're saying. Yeah, there's no static number.
Exactly. For the high wage in demand jobs, we only calculate those on at the statewide level, and the statewide median wage, I believe, is $17.41. Yeah, and so anything that's greater than $17.41 is a median wage for an occupational group will be considered a high wage. But depending on which area that you're in, the median wage might be higher or lower. And actually, I'll take you out to county profiles real quick before I'm done, and I can show you an example of that as well. Actually, county profiles might be next on the docket. So the county profiles just gives you some general workforce statistics and even general statistics on counties. We're going to be updating it with 2018 American Community Survey data here pretty soon. I'll take you out to it. It's actually one of my favorite visualizations. It was built by someone who works over at DOE right now. I don't know if any of you know Penny Henry. She did the majority of the site. She does a great job. She probably might have walked by at some point. Yeah. To get to county profiles, you go over to this research tab right here. Click county profiles. This one has a lot of visualization, so it takes a little while to load, and I'm hoping that we're able to get it, and we do. We have all the counties listed right over here, and we have all kinds of information on the counties from a plethora of different data sources. For example, a lot of this information comes from the American Community Survey, which I briefly talked about, or the Bureau of Economic Analysis. That's where a lot of the wage data comes from, or even information from our office in particular. The snapshot is generally pretty helpful. Unemployment and labor force, all information from our office. That just gives you the unemployment rate and the size of the labor force within that particular group, et cetera, et cetera. Claimants by particular county, occupational wages, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of information here. I don't have time to get into all of it today, but if you're going through this page and you have any sort of questions, please let me know. This median household income figure comes from the American Community Survey. And this can kind of give you an idea of what a particular household makes within a particular county. For example, Androscoggin County, the median household income is just about $50,000. It's a little bit less than the state of Maine, which is a little less than the nation. There's quite a range in Maine for household income. For example, the Squatiquus is about $38,000, whereas the Cumberland County is around 65 actually. So there's quite a range in median household income. So while you're evaluating occupations, that's one thing to think about a little bit, is depending on where your students are working, it can give you an idea of what the general wage is. Obviously, it's a lot more expensive to live in Cumberland County than it may be in Squatiquus County. We actually might have some of that statistics in here. But this gives you a really good idea of just some snapshot data about your county. One other tool that I think is really useful, and probably the last tool that I'll go to today, is the employer locator tool. This one's a little bit harder to get to, and yeah, I always forget to kind of add it over here, but I will add it, and we're actually going to be redesigning the site at some point, so don't get too comfortable with it yet. But hopefully, once we redesign it, it's going to be a little bit easier for you. But if you go over to resources for job seekers right here, you can go up to employer locator, or you can just Google Maine employer locator. It might not be the first page that you get, but it'll be close. And then three clicks to get here. Click on this bottom part right here. We get all this information from a private firm called Info Group. They send us a database of how many employers they think is in Maine. There might be some employers that are in Maine that opened up since we got access to this database that might not be included, or this Info Group wasn't able to find them. But in general, it gives you a lot of information. This page takes a little bit of time to load, and I'm not necessarily sure if I'll be able to load it for everyone. But if not, I have some screenshots over in the presentation, which I may go over to now. So the nice thing about the employer locator is it gives us the option to filter for a number of things. For example, you can take a look at the employer name to get some additional information for it. Let me see if I don't know if I can zoom in on. Oh, yeah. Perfect. At the very top of the screen, you can type in an employer name. The nice thing is it's a wildcard match. So even if you don't have the exact name, for example, I wanted to find the Maine Department of Education. I typed in Department of Ed. It knew what I was talking about, which is pretty nice. So I was able to click on that. I got, sorry about that. And I got some information about it. And again, this says that the employer size is 10 to 19. I know for sure that there's a lot more people working in the Department of Education than 10 to 19 people. So again, they might only be looking at a particular branch. That's kind of the limiting source for this. And I have no idea. Sean, you know who this guy is?
Yeah, it's our commissioner before. They're probably looking at the commissioner's office when they pulled this data in.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a private firm that comes up with this information. I have no idea what they're using in order to find some of this, but the nice thing is, in general, there are certain things that you'll be able to filter for that can give you some good information. On this next slide over here, I canceled out of this, as you can see, and I took a look at employer size ranges between all counties. I want to take a look at the biggest employers in the state. This is something that they do a little bit of a better job with, is the larger employers. I just filtered 500 to 10,000. And I was able to get where these employers located. It gives you a list of those employers right here, and then you can click on those. And if you're looking to take a look at which employers might be hiring folks that are graduating from your program, I think this might be a good place to look, especially with larger employers. You can click on your particular county, say Franklin County, and then you could click over here and see exactly who that employer is. Chances are you probably already know who that employer is, but there also be someone in the weeds that you might not know that you can find information about that employer here. One other thing that I really like about this, and again, it's not always 100% accurate, but it gives you the industry group of a particular employer. Right now we have Axis Worldwide, which used to be located in my building, 45 Commerce Drive. And their industry is information. Information is a really broad industry, so it's kind of hard to tell exactly what they do, but you can see if it's a, if it's a hospital or something like that, just by clicking and seeing some more of that company detail. So I find that to be a pretty helpful tool, and our consumers also like it as well. One of our more popular tools. I promise that I will make it easier to get to. I don't know if I provided a link on here. I hope I did.
If not, I can follow up with it.
Yeah, and for the majority of the visualizations that I showed you today, I tried to make them as easy to find through a search engine as possible. So if you type in Maine occupational projections, the first thing that you'll get is our occupational projection page, and you can go right there. Maine employer locator, I can't remember if we're number 1 or number 2, but we're basically right there. So if you're not really familiar with our site, or you find it pretty challenging to navigate, you can find most things by using a search engine like Google or Bing. And just to one final thing before I go, to get back to our homepage, the easiest way to do that is just click the corner right here. And from our homepage, the biggest, the most useful information I believe for you is Job Outlook, followed quickly by high wage in demand jobs, and then more information on those occupations, like those occupational wage rates by occupation right here. County profiles gives you more. Employer locator, a lot harder to find, but click job seekers and then you get to employer locator right here. So that's about all I have today. Are there any questions before I go? I imagine I went through a lot of information, so I'm sure you'll have a lot to digest while you're going through this. But if you have any questions at all, usually at my desk for the most part in the afternoon. So if you have any sort of question on how something's collected or what something might mean, feel free to give me a call. If I'm not available, we have a couple of other great economists in our office that would be able to help you out as well. But best of luck with everything, and I hope that you find this helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
It was such a challenge before when we were trying to pull this data together. We had multiple sources, and it just was, when you're talking 3 or 4 years ago, it was just so much more challenging. So having a site that's been pulled together like this, and using Tableau, that's the engine that's using backend to control a lot of this information, has been much more helpful to slice and dice it as you wish. Where trying to do that in the old way was in a SQL database or something like this, and you had to know exactly how to ask it. Much more challenging. So this has been very good. And having the web guy right here with us. How can you beat that? You know?
Yeah, if you have any suggestions on how to make anything easier, I try to dedicate like 5 or 6 hours a week of my time to make any sort of quick modifications that I can. For example, right before I came here, I changed the way the filters work on the visualizations, and then actually I felt probably made it more valuable for you. But if there's any sort of quick and easy things that you might notice, oh, I'd like a filter to work a certain way, please email me, and I'd be happy to make that change, because ultimately we're trying to make this as user-friendly as possible, and trying to reach the most amount of people as we possibly can. So any sort of fixes that you might see, or any way to get to a page even quicker, I'm open to all suggestions.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, great. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, if anyone wants to take just 5 minutes while we transition, we'll mute the mic, and then Hunter does have to get to his next meeting, so we'll do that.
Quiet now.
Thanks.
I just want you to know.
Sure.
Getting ready. We are now officially unmuted, so folks in the cyber world can hear us, and we'll go on to the next part of our presentation.
Thanks, Dwight. This has been an ever-changing presentation. Gosh, this is our 4th or 5th attempt to do this because of weather and everything. And just today, as luck would have it, the laptop we were supposed to use didn't have the right software on it, so we had to go to a different laptop. And then that laptop it had a fried motherboard, so now we're on option 3. So I'm going to be showing you information, but I won't be able to actually change data as I hope to show you how to look at the information a little deeper. But it's the very same information I emailed you about your indicators already and all of those emails. But I want to kind of step back a little bit and just talk, because we haven't had an opportunity to talk about information about how we came up with our new definitions, with how Perkins has asked us to reevaluate how we defined how we measure students and stuff like this. So we had to wait till after the comment period to really say much more about how we came up with the proposed secondary levels and how we actually calculated those values. So I first want to start with when we start looking at Perkins for data collections, we're going to use the term concentrator pretty much as the only thing we're measuring. Historically, we've measured concentrators, completers, and participants. Right now, we do still measure or collect information around concentrators and participants for enrollment purposes only, not for your performance data. But as we move forward, it will only be the concentrator. Now, historically, this has been a sore point for a lot of directors, and I agree that 110% when I came on board looked at this. Historically, we used to call a senior a concentrator or a completer when we looked at your data. So you may have a student coming into a program in their senior year, and they're a first-year student, and you're going to call them a completer even though they're only the first year of a 2-year program. How can that be? Then you could also have a junior or a sophomore come in and take a 1-year program, complete it, and again, not be counted towards your values because they were not a senior, even though they had completed a program. There was a at the time, I got to say at the time, when they're looking at automating everything back in 2006, this is the option they came up with, and they took it as a slice of data. So it wasn't, say like if they came up with a value that was 25%. That did not mean 25% of your school met the definition of completed. That meant 25% of your seniors that were measured. So people always looked at that number and said, no, I have a lot more that's completed a program and they're upset. You're exactly right. But we're only measuring the seniors because we needed one slice in time. So now we've had an opportunity with this new definition to really open it up and do it more accurately. And we have much more powerful data tools than we've had in the past. And we're going to do data people. So it's been a good time to move forward with everything. So this is the same information that's been on our website for a few months now. I will be changing it slightly. Donna and I and Dwight have chatted a little bit. When we extracted the data, I came up with an idea, but we had already posted some of this and we weren't sure if we were going to stick with it or not. So now we're going to, just because it's going to make more sense. So as we look at concentrators now, and of course the document doesn't look because we don't have it, forgot about that. The definition will be a concentrator will be a student who is enrolled in your program that current year, and they have been enrolled for the entire year. So when we first started looking at the data, we went from day 1 to end of school, looked at the information. We found that many students came into a program either slightly late, or they might come in 3/4 through the year or a quarter through the year because they had moved in your area. So when I started looking at slicing the data, I found that I was eliminating some of those students because of that. So we stepped back again and looked at what the law tells us we have to use. And the law says that a student has to complete 2 courses of a 3-course program. Our courses, our programs are 3 courses by design of 350 hours. If you do the math, that's how it comes up to it. So I went back and I recalculated and said, how about if I take and say, all the students that start your school year until, I believe it will say like December, if they stay in that time frame, then they're going to be considered a completer because they have enough time in. Then I said, if I go to June and move backwards until like March or February, did it work? Doing this, I found out I was capturing most students. And the students that were dropping off from the list were students that came in, were there for 2 weeks and left the program, but you still used to get hit with them as a dropout. Now you won't. But they come in, take your program, and they leave before the window is set, they will not be counted against you. Historically, they had been.
So can we break it down in months, like how many months consecutively they're in there?
Yep. It's going to be all, we'll post exactly what the dates will be. We have to use dates only because our system won't calculate time, but it will be ballpark. I think it was from like, because we're using October 1st, that's the magic number here in Maine. So we're going to use from October 1st until probably like January 1st. Then it'll be from like end of February to June or something like that. But that's the most I could capture. That basically is 2/3 of a school year. I captured most of it. So when we look forward, those are students who are going to be counted in your numbers when we look at doing the calculations. So hopefully that will solve some of the problems we had in the past. The irritations we had with, you had a bunch of seniors come in and they didn't get counted, and it was not pretty, but it was what we had functionally worked. So
Can I ask a question?
absolutely.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So we have a career exploratory program that's half the semester. So we would be wise, I'm guessing, which doesn't always work this way, but some of the schools are deciding now that they want to put students into that second semester. We'd be really wise to move toward trying to get them enrolled from the beginning of the year.
99, so that I was going to cover this,
Okay.
but 99 programs are not reported as part of programs. That's the next thing we've done. There are certain programs that we look at that don't get counted in the Perkins count. One is a couple schools still have the JMG career program that's for EPS purposes only. They are counted, but we don't report those because they're not counted in the Perkins window. Also, there's a lot of programs in the past that were counted for non-trads that historically maybe they just didn't know to take them out, but like culinary arts is a great example. You may have 75% female in your culinary arts program, and you may think, gosh, I'm doing good for non-trad placement. That's one of my indicators. It doesn't count because that industry now has changed so dramatically that it doesn't matter if it's male or female. It's just the value of non-trad is 25% or more in that field is what used to count. Now they're so close, it doesn't matter. So they've eliminated that zip code. So what I did when I talked to the programmers, I gave them a full list of 60 or 80 zip codes. Said, if one of my schools has these, do not count these against them. So I removed that from your non-trad numbers, again, in an effort to clean it up. So you're not getting counted on. But historically, if you had 75% males in a program, we'll say 80% males in that culinary arts program, and only 20% females, that counted against you. And where it shouldn't have, because that industry doesn't count towards non-trad at all. But because no one had looked at the zip codes, broke them down, and decided which one should have been updated in 2010, I think it was, when they first started looking at it. That never got updated in the databases. And at that time, we'd already defined what the indicators were, so they didn't change them. But now we had a chance to, so we did.
Is there a more current frame of reference for that? I know Donnie used to always refer me. That indicates which program
Yes,
they're in.
yeah, absolutely. I have actually, there's 2 different ways to look at it. I'm going to send out, once we get everything all said and done, I don't know, we can now speak more openly, right, because the deadlines are done.
Yeah.
So I'm going to send you the same information. I've already sent it to you and actually posted it on our website, very generic language. And it's now, I rewrote it this time, and it's very straightforward. It doesn't, we don't use the law language. It's very challenging to understand sometimes. So you'll be able to read it and actually pull it out exactly what we're looking for. In those definition sheets that I put out, I also include a list of all the zip codes I do not count. So when it goes for the non-trad indicators, you'll be able to see that if you have a student in those programs, you don't have to worry about those in there. So that's the two major changes that we've done as indicators. We've been able to change the, looking at the value of what makes up a concentrator, what doesn't, and also looking at how things are measured. So that's the first kind of big change with our indicators. And when we did our public comments, top of my head, I think we had a couple, but I think a few people left comments about our indicators, said we should raise our values. We shouldn't have such low values and challenge higher values. How we came up with these indicator values on this page right here, the baseline information that I'm pointing to has been all calculated using historical data that I had with the new definitions. By saying, looking at these values and going, I'm going to remove all those zip codes we didn't use in the past. I'm going to apply dates to a student instead of if they're a senior or not a senior. So I've already applied all those values to these calculations, and these baselines are as true as we're able to determine at this time. So the beauty of that is when the person said, well, we should want to be higher, absolutely, we want to be. But this is what we're currently looking at as a slice of time for our values. In our performance data, as you can see, is we've done our projections out, and we've done a slight increase each year as we're always trying to improve. This is the concept. And over here at the end of these are the PDFs I currently have out here, where if you wanted to click on this, we will in a moment, it'll actually give you the definition of what it currently is and how I calculated it. I will be updating these with some new information that now we can share since we're beyond the comment period. And again, looking at baseline, think of this year as we look at this baseline data, this is our best guess. And a couple of weeks when I talk about them, I'll tell you they are our best guess because we have not collected data around these. We have done our best in the past to do calculations to find the information, but because of limitations here in Maine, we just weren't able to produce some of the data. Hunter, again, we worked with him and his team. We worked on Social Security numbers. We worked with them trying to come up with a way to come up with labor data on how to calculate information. So he and I have been working together very rigorously with also Dwight as well, trying to come up with a method that his organization can use to give us labor data information so you don't have to, when it comes to Perkins indicators time.
We even met with Bureau of Motor Vehicle. We had heard that some states had done that as well, and so we met with them a couple of times. Everyone has been super helpful, and that's why we had a couple of meetings, and it just, as you can imagine, when you start talking social security numbers, everyone is just really wonky. They're wonky about it, right? For all the right reasons, but what's unfortunate is there's so much data you can get that could really tell a great story. And everyone, we've tried every avenue, 3 meetings with labor, 3 or 4 meetings with Bureau of Motor Vehicle. They took it to their national conference and talked to people.
We took it to our national conference.
We talked to their commissioner, Secretary of State, and it just was, we just at some point had to kind of move on. It's still in the back of our mind, but it's,
So when you folks start thinking about, when we get to those kind of indicators that we don't have defined yet, we're going to present to you is our best guess based on historical information and where we think our data fell previously. So it may or may not be accurate. Baseline allows us this year to collect as much as we can. We can adjust if we need to down the road, at least 2 years from now, something like that. So, but we think we're in pretty good shape except for maybe one. So this is the same thing that you know, the same process you folks are going through right now, trying to figure this information out. We've asked folks to email us in for questions prior to the meeting to help answer what you folks are looking for. We did get a couple, so thank you to the directors that emailed some information in. But I think some of the data that you folks are looking at, you might be getting caught down in the weeds a little too much and thinking that the data we're sending you folks is supposed to be helpful as a tool, not the only data source to use. So you have to use a lot of what you already know about your programs as well to address some of your questions. And I'll show you as we go through the first one here, kind of an indicator of what I'm trying to explain. So we'll first look at how we define it for the first indicator. And this one, the first portion of these come directly from the law. This is exactly what Perkins is asking us to do. And we do it exactly as we've been told to do. So there's not much change in graduation rate. We did, some folks did push back. We did our research and asked us to try to do a 5-year. That's not what's allowable. We're only allowed to do the 4-year graduation rate.
Well, we can do 5, but you have to do 4 too.
You have to do 4 anyway.
4 is a mandate, 5 is an option, but you still have to show 4-year graduation rate data.
And I apologize, that's the other thing that we did too. There was, and within Perkins, we could have asked, we have, we'll say 6 indicators. We could have asked as many as we wanted, and there was probably 9 or so available to us. We did not ask all that. We only asked what the minimums were, just because we know that data is hard to get here in Maine. Some states are top down, where they got plugged into their data systems and can follow that child from birth right through graduation. But we just don't have those options. So trying to ask you folks to gather more data, 5-year graduation rates and stuff like this. There's just gonna be more ways your Perkins is gonna be measured, and then also more ways you may have to apply your money. So we felt as though less was better in this sense. So we went with what was mandated to do. So this one is very similar to what we've had in the past, no surprises there. So we took your historical data, and this is just a sample school that I created from scratch to kind of look at. It uses 2 years of data and basically looks at your programs. Oops, sorry. You got your programs on this side with your zip codes, and then you got just your titles. Here at the top is what I hope in my original email asked you folks to kind of focus on, and maybe it wasn't clear, but this is where the calculations are going to be found and what is focused on for the indicators. So in this example for 1S1, for this sample school for 2 years average worth of data is 91.88. And this is based on, all the columns are very similar in design. It takes the total amount of students who have graduated versus how many students did not graduate and creates a cohort of this data for this indicator. So this is what this is indicating above. This is how many students graduated, how many students did not graduate, and what is that total, so we can build the percentage.
Sean, can I ask a quick question?
Absolutely.
You use the word graduate interchangeable with the high school graduation?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, I mean, graduate from, but they're not graduating from our school,
Correct.
right?
You're correct.
Because we don't give diplomas.
Absolutely.
So you're saying that the school graduation rate, are you referring to our sending schools graduation rate?
The student who attended your school, did they graduate from their sending high school? Correct.
So we're held accountable for that.
Absolutely.
That small segment of their life is we're held accountable
Per the law.
Per the law.
Per the law is where they come from. The concept behind that, in the top is the law. The reason why they do this is CTE is a way to help encourage students to stay in school. So they feel as though our graduation rate, this can help demonstrate that we had a measure to see if this is going up or down based on this. So yes, we're held accountable for other measurements that we may have less impact than we think, but we do have an impact.
And the main reason is that they aligned secondary Perkins with the ESSA accountability. Post-secondary Perkins got mainly aligned with the WIOA accountability.
I'm still
Sorry,
struggling with this just a little bit. When you were talking earlier about the data used to only or would involve completers. When we have students who end with us junior year and go back senior year, they're still being counted, just not until the following year.
They'd be only for that school year. So if you had a junior come in and say that they completed a one-year program, can't think of one top of my head.
Well, health occupations.
There you go, very good. One, and then they come back and they do welding. So when they're there, their junior year, historically, they would not have been counted as a completer. You would mark completed in the database that you send to me. They would be finished in that program. But when we submitted to the feds at that time, it did not meet the definition of what we told the feds we were going to measure. We told the feds in 2006 we were going to only measure seniors at that time. And I think at that time there's a big assumption that 2-year programs were the only way to go and not 1-year programs. So I think that's where a lot of it came from. And they were looking for a way to make a slice in time because they could not measure. Student took part 1 1 year, part 2 the second year. The database at the time didn't have any capacity to measure if the student is returning and are they returning for a section 2 of a 2-section program.
So does it now?
It will because now Perkins is allowing us to measure per year and say they're taking that program within a year. They're not calling them completers anymore. They're calling concentrators. Concentrators used to have the definition of 50% or more, and now they're saying 2/3. So they kind of kept it roughly the same. So now you're looking at 66%.
So I need to interpret it another step. I hope I'm
Sure.
not asking
No,
stupid
this is
questions
great.
that other people understand. Does that mean that a student who only takes a 1-year program with us junior year, that hurts how our data is presented?
Hurt? It didn't help. Historically, it didn't help. Because historically, if you're looking at your completion rates, and that's what they historically was a big thing, or
Like graduation rate, they'll still be picked up just the following year.
no, because it's that year.
Gotcha.
It's in that one school
So
year.
it's a disincentive for us in some ways to bring in sophomores for 2-year programs.
Historically,
Okay, not anymore.
historically.
That's what I needed to verify. Thank you.
So I'm sure other people have gotten this question, so I'll just ask it. I've had people ask me, well, should we not take students anymore who are not, like a guidance counselor comes to us and say, this student's having a hard time, they've had a rough start, probably not a 4-year graduation plan. Should we say, sorry, that makes our data bad, we shouldn't take them?
Can you say that?
Yeah, I mean, I can say a kid is like not a good fit for our program over another kid. I'm just saying that like I had that asked to me by somebody in my office, and I'm just curious if other people have had that like, should we be looking for kids who are on a 4-year graduation plan? Should we be looking, or should we be helping all kids?
I can only say from my point of view, it'd be all kids, but that's just my point of view.
And I'd
That would be
also-
my thing.
yeah.
I can't say.
I mean, again, I think that goes back to Sean's opening comment of digging into the weeds of the data, right? So we can just listen to the data and make all of our decisions based on data, or we can say the data tells one part of the story, and then there's the kid part, right? And so that's I think a big piece.
But it won't affect what we can do with our Perkins money and or.
I can't. Let me say it this way. You're going to be held accountable to a level, but it doesn't. With the level that you're establishing now is going to be your level. So you're not compared to Caribou. You're not compared to Brunswick. You're compared to Bath. So your baseline data is your baseline data, and you need to demonstrate growth from there. You're not comparing to anybody else. So as we move forward, say, okay, if you happen to come up with a low value, it's not bad. It's just what your value is, and hopefully the next year you're going to show some growth on that, and that's what they want to see. No longer do they say we need 25% of all kids do this. 25% in Aroostook County is different from Portland.
And I understand it's on growth, but I think the person that brought it to me, their concern was we don't have an impact on all of it because we get the students when they're already behind. So we can't make an impact always on a kid graduating on time if they come to us not on a track to graduate. And at that point also, like, we can't make an impact on some kids for science because they've completed their science credits for graduation already. And so what impact do we have on all of this?
Again, it goes back to that we made some of those same arguments 3 to 5 years ago. It had continued up until the new authorizations came out. They made it as part requirement to have this. But the difference is now they are not holding everybody accountable to a certain value. They're now saying establish your baseline and see if you can grow from there.
And that goes back to this is what they're requiring. We stuck with just the basic. We could have picked 3 or 4 other things. There's a state
And
that
I
says, you know, that we're going to hold you to that. But yeah, we hear you, but it's what the feds have pushed out to us, and we're trying to Sean's diced it to help you the best way to be able to show.
I think it's best to better reflect the picture you're doing. Historically, I think sometimes it wasn't. I mean, not that it wasn't favorable, it just didn't help you sometimes because you had some of these kids come through and you're like, gosh, they completed, or they were now a concentrator, but just because they're a junior, they didn't count. That's crazy to me. So
I agree.
we're lucky to at least have that. I apologize.
All right, so being the new guy here, here's the new guy question. So I look at 4-year graduation rate, you said baseline 92.51%, but then I hear, well, you establish your own baselines. So I'm a little confused on that.
Yep. This 95 is the state level. We take all you folks and we compile it and we come up with this, what we tell the feds we need to do. Okay. So this is what we have to historically meet now.
As a state.
Correct. So when you do with the data I sent you folks is kind of like what your baseline is based on the new calculations. And that will help you when it comes time for the fall polls to say, instead of you trying to figure out how to calculate that, I've given you that information based on this to bring it forward. Your values could be different. And let's just say you came up at 75%. That would be your baseline, try to improve upon that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
I think go ahead.
Sean, I get just two scenarios, both are happening. I just want to have a student that comes to us from outside of our catchment area, completes Tech 1, Tech 2. It's our certificate of completion. Yet, because of some of the bridges that were burnt at his home school, he's getting his high set and not a diploma. He's still a completer.
So he's left secondary education to go to adult ed.
They made a deal with adult ed.
If they hold
Still
him
getting
on
online
Infinite, if they
classes.
drop him on Infinite Campus, he's a dropout. If he's enrolled in their high school, usually if they go over to adult ed, they're a dropout.
Okay. We're accepting a student Monday that is transferring from Rockland because of a move.
Sure.
He's not in our, or she's not in our October 1st numbers. Are they still, if they graduate, they're still going to be a completer?
They should, I believe so. I think that once they stay with you until the end of the year, yes. Okay. Historically, they may have been sliced off, or not counted because they weren't there for that full window of time. But now that we're applying dates of enrollment to these, I believe it's February plays out.
So it will show that they started in Rockland from
it won't show anything about
September
Rockland.
to.
Nope. I mean, that would be like on the EPS kind of stuff, not for Perkins indicators, anything like that. For Perkins indicators, it'll look at did they meet this allotment of time, and then I can use whatever attributes are associated with that child. I can use those as part of your data set. If they graduate, great. If they are a junior, but they complete your program, I can count them as a concentrator for you. Yes, things like that.
And so if
And I want to, I don't mean to, because we are now pushing up against 3 o'clock, and I know Donna is going to want some time, and there's some key questions for her on the application. So there's every scenario we could go through, right? And as you get into those individual scenarios, Sean is certainly willing and be able to kind of walk through that. Some of these indicators, they are what they are, and we're trying to dice them and as much as we can positively. And if you leave here and you have more questions, we can certainly do that. But I want to just be cognizant of our time and make sure Donna gets a chance to answer some of those questions. So.
Well, then let me just skip to one of the things I think is the biggest question of the day, at least I feel is confusing. When you're going through your needs assessment, there are questions upon like non-trad placement, or if you look at the data set that we sent you now, you can see in this example here, we're giving you a lot more information. We're giving you graduation rate per program now, graduation rate per male or female. This is all information you folks never had before, at least from us. You probably calculated on your side. So with this amount of data, it becomes more information. But then you get more information, you get bogged down in the weeds. We don't want this to become the tool where you folks focus on just whatever the values are here. Like in this example here for non-trad is 75%. My gosh, that's got to be great, right? But same time, you have to know horticulture, I only had 4 kids in that program that year. So you need to know kind of your programs themselves to know if these values are historically relevant or not. You need to kind of get, I don't want you to get caught up and go, oh my gosh, this is, or see zeros. I mean, I got a couple of emails from people saying, this thing's full of zeros. What the heck happened? Well, you didn't have anybody in that race code. So that's okay. That's no big deal. Zeros are okay. Once we move forward, again, I apologize, but it was the time crunch we're under and the department's lack of resourcing to be able to do this. I wanted to build a system where you can log in and see all the values for yourselves. You go in and say, this example here, that if I had 5 kids in horticulture, you could see 5 children. Anything less than 10, I can't show you. And now even less than 10, I have to compare it to other parts of the data set. Am I exposing children's information? Because you could say there's 10 students in this, and you know there's 4, we'll say African Americans. And now can you narrow down to the white children in the program or something? So I have to show you a lot less information when I make public reports. And it's frustrating. I understand that, trust me. Our goal is next year to have this exact same concept as you're seeing here, but in a system where you can log in with your credentials and you can see your values. You'll be able to see how many students, if it says 25% or 75% in this example, does that represent 1 or 2 children? Do I need to really worry about that? Or is that 60 kids in this program versus none over here? Then that's something to think about. Again, this is baseline to think of it concept-wise. Try to get you the information. That's the goal of it. I don't want you to get kind of hung up in the weeds of it all. So our goal is next year to get you those values. And also when it comes to performance data for that we're being held accountable for their math score and their English and science. We now have a new system that we have paid for that will allow you folks to log in and see your students and see their assessment scores. So now, before historically, you never knew who your students were or how they were counted. Now you'll be able to log in per year, per enrollment, and go out and see those values for that child. We're hoping we'll have that up and ready probably by next year. Probably could have it ready this year, but I've been used to you folks because your folks are just trying to do this information here. It's been too much. But you'll be able to look at that information and pull it forward and see those struggling students as well. Where historically you'd have to ask the sending schools, you may not have got it in a timely fashion. You'll be able to get yourself. Yes.
Sorry if I'm missing something. So before we used to get the sheet, we had to say whether it was met or it wasn't met. We had to write about that in Perkins. And I can see in the local needs assessment where we have to talk about and answer the strengths and the challenges, but there's no met or didn't meet because based on our own school. Are we supposed to create our own growth chart using a form? No, we just need to talk about our strengths and our challenges.
Right. This is your really pulling up your data and examining it.
Okay.
So what we're going to do in this year, just this past December, I submitted information to the feds for Perkins was just enrollment data. Next year will be the same thing. It's just enrollment data. Because this is our next year is you building, this year is we're defining our baseline information. Next year we're going to start completing it. So it'll be a year out. So you don't have to.
The only thing we have to do with this is look at the data and answer the strengths and the challenge questions within the local needs assessment.
along the same lines. Do you want our data analysis? I know you asked for some documentation. Better to put it in an appendix or put it in the context of the question that we're answering? I'm trying to prepare it so that the next person who handles it can see what the data points were and really compare apples and apples 2
I
years from
think
now.
that's more of a dumb question.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
I would say we don't need that much detail,
Mhm.
just an explanation of how you got to where you got.
But maybe an appendix could help.
If you want to share
I think
it,
so.
more
I wanna be
information is
sure
usually
that the
better.
next person knows what the frame of reference was.
But I just don't
guess.
want everybody to think that they have to do the same thing. So if you have it, share it. If you know, what we really need to see is that you looked at your data,
And
you compared that data to your programs, and you figured out what you're really good at, what you're really bad at, what students are succeeding, what students need some help, and how can Perkins funds be used to address those problems.
thank you.
Okay, Sean, Rick?
That's pretty much what I had. Not to, like I said, we've only got about 20 minutes left. But that's out on our webpage, has all the definitions. Like I said, they're written more clearly now than they have in the past. You can see how you've been written, like in this one here, percentage of concentrators who are proficient, blah, blah, blah. Before, it used to be very narratively, and you'd have a hard time reading what it meant. I even give examples of how the calculations are done. Other resources we're bringing to you folks is now you have the opportunity to count students who, for like placement, who have gone out and volunteered and joined the Peace Corps, something like this. So I have contacted the individual who manages that here in Maine, so they can come to a MACD meeting if you're interested and speak to you about those opportunities, because that is now an indicator that can be measured and help with that. We have talked to them, seen if there's a way we could somehow give them the student indicator number. They can give back how many people did it to help speed up that process for you. Again, Social Security numbers and all this, we've hit kind of a wall on that, but we're continuing those conversations. But again, we've got you, the director for the state of Maine, got their contact information, and they'd like to come speak to you folks sometime soon. So, that's about the biggest chunks I had. The indicator that's going to be the hardest one to pick is going to be placement. And right now, what we're thinking of doing is Dwight and I are continuing conversations. But if that falls through, we may have to ask you folks to do like a follow-up survey, like most states do on that, to reach out to the student in 2 quarters out to find out what they're doing. And we'll build a system so we can have that submitted to us, so then we can incorporate it into the values. That's our last case scenario. We haven't gone there yet because we're trying to find a automated system to take this burden off you. But if we can't, we're gonna have to do like some other states have done. Any questions before I turn it over to Donna? And I'm sorry, Donna, I used up so much of your time.
Just clarification.
Sure.
Peace Corps people who finished a bachelor's degree, but it sounds like reading in the down below, these would cover city year and.
Bachelor's degree, tell maybe those indicators or you're looking at is for the post-secondary?
Oh, maybe I have no post-secondary placement.
Oh, they go like, yeah, we have the ability to look at enrollments into colleges. We use the National Student Clearinghouse historically.
Yeah.
So we can see those, so we can get a percentage of those students that qualify. And when we look at follow-up surveys for your students, if that's what you have to do, we would provide you the list of the students that need to be contacted. It's not, say if you had 200 students, but only 100 of them graduated, you'll need to contact the graduating students, not everything. So there's some information we're looking at the system to provide you if that comes the rub at that point. We'll let you know. Thank you.
Sean? I want to start by going back to Julie's question around the data and being dinged on students. This law says that if you don't meet your accountability measures, you have to write improvement plans, which is what Sean tracks through the Perkins grant. It also says that states have the right to target your funds. We can't ever take funds away from you, but we can target how you use them. It is unlikely Maine would ever do that. I would rather have you say 4 years in a row that you didn't make an accountability measure because you helped 50 students that otherwise would not be helped. So when you are doing a improvement plan, and if you're not improving, those would be some of the things you would be putting in there. So Sean can see that it's not, you're not doing anything. It's that you're pulling in another group of students to try to give them help.
Or by your data, you can demonstrate that you have the influx that has changed those values and caused you to draw. In looking at this more, we will do, as we've done yearly negotiations, we're going to build a tool because each one of you folks, it's in your best interest to do a very good job on your needs assessment and this data analysis, because you'll have to set your own individual values or accept the state's value. And let's say if 95% is high, and you decide, I don't want to do it, I don't want to work with it, I'll just take the 95%. Now we may have to target your money to say, no, you're going to have to put money towards this. So that's why it's very important to do a good job of this analysis now, so you can individually set your own your values. And I'll have to track that on some system, so we'll negotiate every year.
But access and equity is a huge part of Perkins. So if they heard you were denying students because you thought you were going to lose a number on their accountability system, I am guessing that would be targeted against you instead of for you. They would rather see you helping the students. You just have to be able to justify that's the reason that you're not meeting that measure. Other than that, I have shared with you the local needs assessment. I've shared the rubric we're going to use to review them. I put over there, I've updated the question and answer page. We had a few more questions that have come in. This is up on our website. And as I get questions, I just keep putting the questions and answers up here. I've included all the places in the act where it says we're not the mean ones. The feds are the mean ones.
Nice try.
So the main things for us is that they're due April 3rd. The reason is we as a team have to review all of those to make sure everything has been addressed, so that when you write your applications, we're taking your needs assessment side by side with your application, making sure they align, because that is what is a requirement of the federal law.
And you said you have also provided an evaluate, how you're going to
Yes.
evaluate it?
Yes, it's up on our website.
Okay.
I don't have I think.
Is that PDF?
Is it under resources?
Yeah, it's under the Perkins 5 resources. So if you go to our webpage, the CTE DOE webpage,
yep,
there's a Perkins 5 link, and then on that page is the Perkins 5 resources page. And all of these documents are up there every time we create something, have questions, everything's going up there so that everybody is receiving the same information. Yes. Should look like what Sean has pulled up. So we have we have everything up here. The local needs assessment itself, the question and answers. This review template is what we're using. This is not something you have to fill out. It's just showing you.
But if I look at that.
Yes.
Okay.
It's very high level.
Okay.
Our main thing is we have to look to see that you show us that you looked at your data, you looked at your programs, you talked to your stakeholders, and you come up with a plan to use your money.
So that's just to reiterate, that's our document, but we wanted to share it with you. So as we look through yours, these are the things we're going to be looking for. We're going to be filling it out. So we wanted to put that right up there so you know that.
Because I think some of the questions that we've been getting, I think people were focused too much in the weeds and trying to build some type of big data analysis project that is not what we're asking you to do. We're asking you have to, these are the accountability measures and we have to report on them. But more importantly too, you have to show us that you're talking to the people you have to talk to, that you're actually looking at your programs, and that you're trying to make your programs better to help students succeed. That's the big thing with Perkins is they like to hear those stories of students succeeding. Unfortunately, the numbers we have to use do not show that in the big scheme of things. But they have to take all of the state's data together and they have to report to Congress. So they can't take a narrative from Maine and a narrative from California and things like that because they have to do it like this. So that's why we have specific accountability measures.
So if you think of the Donna and I were talking this morning, if you think of the data as where you were, right? This is where we were. Think of today as where we are. This is a picture of when we get to talk and think about where we are, what's going on, and then your local needs assessment is where you want to be. So it's that kind of that type of thinking of we always want to think about where we've been, where we are, and where we want to go. So where we've been, this is what the data is telling us. Where we are is where we are today. We talk to our stakeholders, we talk to folks. This is where we are today. And our needs assessment is going to take us to where we want to be. So thinking it through that way.
Another group of questions that we've heard is about if we work together, do we all have to submit something? And the answer is yes. All eligible recipients have to submit their local needs assessment. And if you think about that, if you did one for an area, who's responsible? We tried that with those of you who have been here a while with Tech Prep. We had consortiums, and some schools got some things, and of course Susan was marvelous. Her schools all loved her. Some of the other areas felt that the money went to Northern Maine, so was Washington County getting served? So that's where you can. And Maine people are very independent, and there's probably not a lot of you in the room that want to join together and figure out how to spend your money as a group. But that being said, a lot of the information is probably going to be the same for your group. What you have to do is when you get towards the back of it and it starts asking you about programs and action steps, those should be aligned to your school. So if Rob submits something that he has to improve his cosmetology program and he doesn't have one, then we might question it.
It's a satellite.
So this isn't a document for us to try to catch you at things. It's just,
It's not a gotcha.
right, it's something that we all have to get through. We at the state level had to get through the stakeholder meetings and taking the stuff to the board and all of these things that haven't been all that pleasant this last year, but we got through it. So I have faith in you. Yes.
This is not a question.
Sure.
It's a statement, and it's not in any way intended as criticism. But I guess I would just say, I think I speak for all of us when the directors and folks from CTE schools that thank Dwight and Sean for your work and your partnership with us, because it's much appreciated and valued. I guess I'm saying, just for the record, I feel like there is a tension. I suspect other people would agree with me. There's a tension between the goal of this. I think is to improve, and I think we would all agree that's a good thing. But the reality that we see around, our 279s came out yesterday, and we're more or less on a holding pattern. We're not including equipment. We're not including a lot of the things that typically then will end up getting passed off to our Perkins budget. And then what's left after you finish doing those things are, is smaller and smaller. In my case, smaller and smaller every year. So I guess I'm just saying, for the record, I worry about my level of ability to be ambitious in terms of school improvement. When we see more targeted funds, more need in the just the maintenance and equipment area, and then when we look at what, again, I think we're all agreeing on very real needs in terms of serving students to do better. I worry about my ability to reach them.
Yeah. And we hear it, and we're, as you know, the two bills that are coming out next week, I've had several conversations in the last week about that very thing, and realizing that the pie is only so big, and you can only impact it so much with this funding and with some of the other funding that we've had. And what's the next step? And how do we overcome that? So
And that being said, that's where you have to make sure that your needs show up in your needs assessment, so that you can spend your Perkins money on that. That's why it's important to do. out of
This
the job.
could be that tool. You know, we just got asked, can you give me specifics? And say, I can give you kind of specifics, but this could be, you know, the other flip side of this is this could be your opportunity to be specific and say, this is, and then we can pull that information and share that and say,
Is there ever a chance, I mean, this is just the optimist in me, that we do an awesome job, well, we'll do that, defining our need, but that at the federal level, they say, whoa, community is a lot needier than we thought, we're gonna relocate. No. Surprise. I'm punchy, I'm sorry.
No, Perkins
Perkins.
is a formula grant, so just like you guys have a formula, the state level has a formula, so we get plugged in, and
We
unfortunately,
throw some whoopie pies in there.
yeah, we've tried. Yeah.
So, yeah.
We fought that every step of the way, that, you know, and I've heard the thing, you know, Fort Van Buren has to do the same amount of work as Lewiston does. And when we sit at the federal level, you know, Maine has to do the same amount of work as California does. And when you look at the two budgets, they're more different than Van Buren and Lewiston when it comes to that.
Julie's got a question.
I have two questions. One of my concerns, and I don't know if you can just try to make me feel a little bit better about this, is like, I just had something happen this year where I had a program that was doing, I never would have imagined it would have needed anything, and something broke, like very unexpectedly. Never would I have thought that was going to happen, and I luckily had not purchased another piece of equipment that I thought I was going to purchase this year with Perkins, and I have the flexibility right now to switch it. If I try to write this generally enough that we're aligning our programs to post-secondary and we update equipment as necessary with second.
Well, I don't even think you need to be that specific. One of the things, like, a lot of you were at one point in time involved at some meeting we had for our stakeholder meetings. And in our state plan are the 7 top things that came out of those. So in those 7, I can't think of them all off the top of my head, but career pathways, teacher professional development, you know, things like that were in there. And when you think about those things, a career pathway, having the equipment that works is important for that career pathway, because if that program doesn't have the equipment, they can't work to industry standards, so they can't connect to post-secondary, so they can't get, so I think you're digging too far down.
Okay, well, the way we had a great productive meeting the other day, and what we decided is that we'd all take on like a section, and then we'd all fill it in and then take it back to our own schools and update it specifically, so to include all the very general information that everybody in the state is doing, if that's okay. The second thing is, it sounded really good when I asked this, but the program of study template is completely different than last time I used it, and it looks much more general and not specific to sending schools and whatever I was putting in before. So I asked SMCC if they'd do it for us for all of our programs, and they said yes. Is that okay?
Yeah. If you can get them to do it.
Okay.
We had them in the room.
They were, but he seemed like, of course, if you're all going to benefit from it and you're all doing concurrent enrollments in our program, of course we'll do this. Just tell us what programs you're doing for.
Dwight and I had a big conversation. Our whole team has had conversations on this. And back in 2006, when programs of study first came out, it was, you know, everybody had to go sign on. So the idea was on paper at the federal level that Rob was going over to Edward Little and sitting down and having long discussion, and then going to Lewiston, and then going here, and then going there, and everybody was signing off. And as the years progressed, what we heard was, yeah, my secretary sends that over to Edward Little, their secretary stamps it, sends it back. So those conversations weren't, so all we were doing is busy work.
What it sounds like though with this is that, like, with the MOA and everything that's going on at the post-secondary level, where they're changing their math needs based on programs, that if they were the ones responsible for doing them, it would just make more sense for everybody.
It would if they would do it. I mean, if they're the ones saying, yeah, we're going to accept
because
this.
We could write them and have them sign it, all 5 of us in the room, or they could do it one person and we could all sign it, and it just seems to be, then we're all doing the same thing statewide.
And the best way for that to happen is exactly how you just described.
Communication.
A group of you meet with SMCC and they say, yeah, we'll do it. But as soon as I say that, to the community college system and say, hey, we've got this great idea and we want you to do all of that work. And no, that's not.
But that's okay if that happens that way.
If you do it at a local level and build upon that, that's the best way for those things to happen.
Because what we found with the program of study, as you all know, students have to meet graduation requirements at the high schools. And each high school may be a little different, but they all have requirements. They all have to do the Maine learning results. They all have to do their English language, math, all their standards. And then at your schools, you had stuff to do. And at each of the community colleges, each one's a little different. So we tried to condense that as much as we could. And then we looked at who has to sign this. And we went to who we felt was the people that actually knew what was going on, which is the director or the designee, or I think we did, did we do president or designee, I think maybe?
Yeah.
So if the president says, you know, I just want my department chair to sign off on these, if that's their designee, that's fine. You don't have to have everybody's signature. We got away from what is best for the students, and we were looking at this great document and not actually looking at what is going to help a student get post-secondary credit while they're in secondary. And that comes down to what is the most important thing.
So I'm going to give Donna a chance to spin around and look at her computer just in case there's questions that popped out.
I have a couple too. that I'm gonna have.
And again, being cognizant
A
of time.
snarky remark from Tim Prescott.
Not worth it.
No wonder you guys didn't pick them up on the way down.
We went the other way.
He's better off than the friends guy.
A couple more. Go ahead.
So Donna, I have read that, but I'm not up to date on it. So I have a couple questions from section 3, the program of study category. And one question was, are students being retained in the same program of study? Is that a post-secondary question about comparable placement? Or is that a secondary question?
It's sort of both. It goes back to that alignment between secondary and post-secondary. So that goes both ways. At secondary, we hear a lot, you know, one of our great things is that we have students come in, they figure out they don't want to do nursing or they don't want to be an auto mechanic. So that is a really important piece of secondary education. They're not paying to figure that out. But at the federal level, they want to see our automotive students going on to an automotive program. Our CNA students actually going into a health occupation program. So they're looking at those big career pathways
for them.
And don't get too bogged down, like Hunter was saying, the programs you teach have many occupations.
Right. We have lots of kids going into animal science coming out of
Right,
programs and all these other
and that's still in that career pathway. So step back and think of it as a career pathway and not necessarily program to program, but within that career pathway, career cluster.
Category. And then just one more quick question. And I don't know if I took this from there, but I have notes under the question, do students and programs earn recognized post-secondary credentials? Do you want to know the programs that do not as a separate or as a piece of that under the challenge?
You mean that's up to you. What is best for you to know for your school?
All right. For some reason, I thought that was required. I had asterisks all over it and then read like somewhere I'd seen it.
Those questions are guiding questions on the local needs assessment for you to figure out what you need to know for your school to share with your stakeholders so that you can come back and address the Perkins application.
So with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you all for
More snarkiness
coming in.
He told me Tim Prescott wants to go on the record that I should not make fun of him.